BSG have just released a massive audio patch based on a brand new sound ray tracing system, so naturally I've been testing it out to see how it compares with before. On the whole, it seems, and I can't believe I'm saying this, really quite good. But I haven't covered some interesting features of the new system, including how to make no noise whatsoever through bushes, but we'll come on to that in a moment. First, as usual, we need to run through the regular headset tests, and this time we'll be doing things a little bit differently. If you're even remotely familiar with my audio testing videos in the past, you'll have seen this chart here, which I have redone for this patch. I test all the headsets for running, and then I just use the best one for the other movements to save time, which is normally the Contact 6, as the order is always held for the other movements so far. As expected, not much has changed, and the results are mostly the same as last time. Not exactly the same, as the ranges are somewhat subjective, but I don't think anything big has been adjusted here, and the headset order is also generally the same as well. However, I do want to focus on the biggest mistakes that people make with the system as it is right now, starting with crouch walking too early. The issue here is that although walking and crouching have dramatically different distances for hearing, it doesn't kick in right away when you're changing stance. If you start moving as soon as you press the crouch button, the old walk sound distance will still play for a second or so. In short, if you need to be quiet, make sure your character has completed the animation of standing to crouching, otherwise you'll give yourself away in that first instant. The second one is the slide stop. All the experienced players know not to do this, and you hear it mainly as a telltale sign of scav movement rather than actual players, being when you come to a halt from a full sprint without cancelling the sprint first. The problem with this sound in particular is that it's even longer than regular running, matching that of running overweight at 75 meters. So make sure you cancel your sprint first before you come to a stop. Third, we have jumping versus vaulting. Jumping, and to be precise, landing specifically, is another sound that is incredibly loud. In fact, it is the loudest PMC movement in the game, audible from around 85 meters away, further than any running even overweight. Vaulting, on the other hand, is very, very quiet. You can only hear this at about 28 meters, which is shorter than the limits of the slow walk anyway, so it's actually very unlikely that the vault itself will get you heard. Finally, although it looks like walking is pointless compared to running, you have to keep in mind that these are the maximum ranges for hearing under perfect silence otherwise. Often when there's other stuff going on, or even just your own PMC's footsteps, these sounds will mask softer ones like enemies walking at long distances, which might not be the case for running as it is louder and more distinctive. That being said, understanding the difference between the possible ranges for different movements is important to mask your audio as much as possible when engaging a target. Before we continue, imagine playing Tarkov with no cheaters, no aimbot, no wall hacks, and no paid carries in any of your raids. Today's video is sponsored by PlaySafeID, and this is exactly what they are trying to achieve. But to make this a reality, they need your help. The problem with cheating in games is that when people are caught, they often simply buy another account and jump right back in. And the fragmented approach to anti-cheat in each game clearly isn't enough to prevent the epidemic across the industry. The difference with PlaySafe then is that it isn't actually an anti-cheat. Instead, anyone caught cheating in any of the games that it's integrated with will face penalties not on their game account, but on their PlaySafeID. This means that if someone is caught, for example, in PUBG, they'll be unable to access PlaySafe protected matchmaking in Tarkov, Apex, Call of Duty, and all the rest. For this to work though, the developers of these games need to take this solution seriously, and for that, we need you. All you have to do at this stage is go to the link in the description and register your interest. That's it. It's so easy and will take less than 10 seconds. With your vote, alongside tens of thousands of other gamers, PlaySafeID will be building the strongest possible case to change the gaming industry forever and crack down on cheating once and for all. The important thing to remember about PlaySafeID is that it's optional, it's free, and it won't be required to play any of the games that you own either now or in the future. What it does do is allow a more protected circle of matchmaking above the regular one, where you know that the chance of running into a cheater is significantly reduced. How it works is neat but simple. Every gamer can claim one single PlaySafeID for life through a special check called Zero Knowledge Verification. This means that PlaySafe can verify that you are real and that you haven't had an account before without ever having any of your documents or data. So if you want to see a world with no cheaters in online multiplayer, and I know I certainly do, then head to the link and go and register your interest to see this dream become reality. Alright, so onto the bugs and other general weirdness before we tackle floors, stairwells and occlusion. Firstly, the suppressor audibility distance is still about 100 meters. I checked this time with the RD704 and the SVD because that's a pretty loud gun, and to my knowledge it's only the suppressed Ash 12 that you can hear further than this. It was 160 meters last time I checked. For all the other guns, after 100 meters, you will still get the bullet crack and hear a round whizzing past, but there's no muzzle sound to help locate where the shot is coming from. Unfortunately, the bullet crack bug is also still in the game. This is the one where you hear a bullet crack if someone is facing directly away from you and fires their gun. This must be something to do with the calculation going in both directions accidentally, but it's been around for a long while. The last one, which is new to this wipe I'm pretty sure, is to do with bushes. Remember that with 16.7 itself, we got a specific reduced the loudness of bushes in first and third person. Well, it seems like something got a bit screwed up here. If you run into a bush and then leave it again, this all works as you'd expect. And I tested the distance, by the way, the sound starts if you're closer than about 43 meters. But if you sit in the bush and move around, something really odd happens. It appears that each time the sound plays, it gets less and less until the bush audio disappears completely. That means that, theoretically, you're able to get into a bush and move around a bunch to diminish the audio, and once you've done that for about 5 audio plays or so, no one can hear it anymore at all. Now, this is probably just some rat tech type stuff that doesn't particularly matter in most people's gameplay, but I can think of some places where it could be extremely powerful. To note, this doesn't only work when standing, but you can be crouched and even prone. And when prone, given rotating on the spot is already silent, this means you can become a completely invisible, inaudible bush turret. Deadly in the wrong hands. Now onto arguably the most important section, which is all to do with multiple levels, doors, windows and staircases, which this new system primarily addresses. As per last time, doors and windows being open or closed makes a massive difference to the audio occlusion, i.e. how muffled a sound is when passing through an object. Let's take a look at the floors on dorms. On the ground level, with the door shut running inside, it sounds like this. And running with the door open sounds like this. Sound changes the moment the door is interacted with, so the sound becomes muffled as soon as the door starts to close. Similarly, with glass, it's very obstructive to sound when the pane is intact, but once it takes some damage and there is any glass missing at all, the audio leaks out like a sieve. As for the other floors, let's take a comparison. This is in 3-story dorms, so first I'll show the ground level, and then the middle level, and finally the upper floor. First off, we have this one with all of the doors shut. They do all sound quite similar, except for the volume and how quickly it tails off. Not very quickly at all for the same floor, relatively quickly for the 1 floor above, and 2 floors higher is much quieter from the outside. Now for with doors open. two floors above begin sounding quite similar with the door open, as the sound isn't obstructed anymore. But as our target PMC moves into the building, the footstep audio gets a kind of tinny quality to signal that they are above. Between the two higher floors, outside of volume specifically, I do think it's quite hard to tell between them, but maybe with a bit more practice it will become obvious. While we're here in dorms, by the way, it's worth mentioning about the desynchronization of sounds between clients. This was really annoying in the past because you could sometimes make sounds for somebody else that didn't play for you on your client. This was easily replicable before, but when I tested it this time, it seems much more consistent. I did get a few moments where the sound didn't seem quite the same between the two clients, and you do still get this effect sometimes, but from the tests that I did do, it is significantly improved on this front. Most notably, it seems that the instances of the dreaded drop sound that we were talking about earlier have been reduced a lot when moving around and over small objects, which is a particular issue when it goes wrong because of its sheer volume compared to everything else. Alright, so next up, let's move to factory for the next set of testing. The one thing that I noticed on this map is that some areas seem to act like dead zones or transitions, and you can hear what sounds like a delay as the audio engine shifts from one regime to the other. To me, this sounds a little bit like when they added the windows to doors transition audio from inside and outside to prevent the audio from instantly snapping from one type to another. This means that it's blended in some way, but also there can be a little delay as it switches over from one type to the next. Being underground is also very, very quiet in certain areas, depending on how close you are to the openings or the staircases, which we'll go into a bit more detail on in a moment. The two extra complex areas on factory are the section in the office and the other multi-level section over in the new area by the small lab. Interestingly, because the middle floor of the office area with the bathrooms is entirely sealed off and has no windows, this audio is more occluded than that on the office corridor itself, even though it's higher, because that has an opening to the skybridge and the windows along the corridor are already broken when the raid starts. In this other section, over more towards the med tents, being one floor up demonstrates the new system quite well. You have to be very careful if the area is open, as the audio sounds much the same as if they were on the same floor as you when they are close to the gap. One level further up, however, and the audio sounds really good. The target PMC is quite close to us, but you can start to hear the tinny effect as they run back a little and a few objects get in the way. Very, very cool. I did also try listening from underground. The top level, which is basically 3 floors up at this point, is practically inaudible, which is pretty good. Second floor, you can kind of hear them running around, but it's especially clear when they get near the staircase. On the ground level, it sounds like the general one floor up audio, so all of that seems to be working quite well. I will note though, that you can hear our other PMC most clearly when he's coming down the stairs. This is kind of curious given that Tarkov has historically dealt with staircase audio particularly badly, and this leads us onto Shoreline Resort. To properly tackle staircases, Resort is the perfect testing ground as it has multiple layers and they are sealed off by default. What I found most interesting about all the stairs that I tested is that it appears, at least to me, that you can be heard on stairs now more so than on the floor that you were on before. Let me show you this clip here with the observer outside the resort and our test PMC on the top floor. As soon as you go onto the stairwell, we can suddenly hear the footsteps. This is with contact 6s again, just for reference. It's very intriguing and is either coded especially to make sure that the staircase audio is actually working for once, or it's a symptom of the new ray style model where the open area of the staircase allows for some of the rays to reach our target with less occlusion than they otherwise would do normally. Either way, if it's choosing between this or not hearing them at all, the new system is a clear winner by a country mile, although it can make it a bit confusing to work out which floor a player is on sometimes. Even the areas around the holes in the floor seem to work pretty well. I'm not a resort main by any means, but it sounded pretty reasonable as far as I could tell. The only place where I found really anything that I disliked a lot was a section where the occlusion snaps in very quickly when a player is travelling inside to outside below you in the west wing. Again, maybe this is just a consequence of the rays suddenly failing to reach our PMC's ears from our target, and once the window is smashed, it sounds fine again, but given the community was waiting with anxious breath about this whole new system overall, I'd say this is a massive win so far. So do remember to go and register your interest for PlaySafeID, otherwise a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.